All right, y'all are having some issues when you're making your marshmallow fondant, so in this video, I want to try to help you out. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. So marshmallow fondant. I make my own. I've been making my own marshmallow fondant for so long. I never really used store-bought fondant. And I have a bunch of videos showing you how I do that. And I have been getting a lot of messages of people using my recipe and it doesn't turn out right. So it's usually either too dry or too wet. And I just want to show you what I do just to make sure that I get it to the right consistency. So I hope this helps, and let's get into the video. So to do this, you're gonna need 12 ounces of marshmallows. Now, I wanna let you know that this recipe is a general guideline. You have to see what the fondant looks like to decide if you need to add more sugar or liquid or whatever. So just use this as a guide. So we're gonna do 12 ounces of marshmallows. I prefer to use the bigger ones. You can use whatever ones you want. Getting a little bit of shortening on my paper towel and wipe it inside the bowl. All right, we have all the marshmallows in the bowl right now, and I eyeball it. You can measure it out if you want. I have light corn syrup here, and I do about a tablespoon of corn syrup. So I do just a little bloop of corn syrup, but you can measure it out. I make a lot of fondant, and if I take time measuring everything exact, it would just take too much time. So I just eyeball this whole thing. And then again, with the water, I probably add about a tablespoon of water. I'm gonna put this in the microwave for 1 minute and 45 seconds on high. While that's in the microwave, I'm gonna open the bag. This is powdered sugar, 2 pounds. And I'm gonna do this part over the sink. So I'm gonna do about half of the sugar. I'm gonna sift half the sugar into this bowl. Just using a strainer, and I'm just gonna shake back and forth. You can use whatever method that you like to use to sift sugar. All right, that was a little more than half of the bag. And then I have a separate bowl here, and I'm just going to sift the rest of the sugar into this bowl. Setting this aside, now I have the melted marshmallow mixture. I just took this out of some Sweetex, so it has some Sweetex on it, which is okay. I was making icing and I was using this, so I'm just going to use this to stir. That way it's not going to stick to the paddle, although it doesn't matter if it does. I'm going to add this entire bowl to the bowl with the sugar in it. I have the dough hook attachment on here. I forgot to put Crisco on here, so you can put shortening on here. Not a big deal if you don't. And then I'm just going to sprinkle about half of what's left in the sugar on top. So we still have some sugar in here. It's not the whole thing. Put this down, lock it into place. I had someone tell me to use a wet towel before, and I'm trying that out. It probably catches more of the sugar. So I'm going to cover this so the sugar doesn't go everywhere, and I'm going to put it on low and just let it mix for about a minute or two until you hear it start to come together. I can hear it slowing down. I'm going to turn it up a notch and then lift up. All right. So let's look at this consistency here. Now look at that. The fondant is dry. You can't keep adding the rest of the sugar while the fondant is this dry. It needs more liquid. So if you see it dry like that, it's actually wetter at the top. So what I'm going to do is just get a spatula, take it off, scrape down the sides. This fondant is dry. It needs more liquid. So I'm going to put it back on and add a little bit at a time. That was about a half a tablespoon. It's going to start to pick up the sugar that's on the bottom of the bowl. You don't need to add a lot of liquid at a time. Add a little bit and wait to see what happens. It's still a little dry. You can see that there's still some dry sugar on the bottom. So this needs more liquid. So I'm going to add like another about a half a tablespoon of liquid and mix it. Now I'm going to turn it up to about 4 or 5. And now pull it back and see that it's wrapping around the hook. My hands are clean and I'm just getting some Crisco on here, and I just want to feel the consistency. This is good. This is good. So look at it. It's stretching, right? It's not dry. It's not falling apart. When I turn it on, lift it up, you know, like it's holding its shape. It's not super dry like it was, and it's not too wet. You have to, like, I have to eyeball it to get it to this consistency. So I saw that it was really dry and it needed more water. Now, this is all the sugar that I have left. I did not have to use all the sugar in this recipe because it came together so easily. So now I just want to get a little bit of shortening on the counter and in my hands, my clean hands, and get all of this off of here and just knead it together. If you choose to, this is Tylose powder, the label fell off. I keep using this container. You can add just a little bit. I had someone comment on my videos before saying that it's annoying that I don't measure. So here is a 1/4 teaspoon of Tylose powder. And I am just sprinkling that on the entire thing and kneading this all together. Now you can skip this step. I just use so much of it. I prefer to add it now once I make the fondant rather than every time I rip a piece off. And sometimes, depending on how soft the fondant is, I'll have to add more Tylose powder after this. And look how nice that is. I have a piece of plastic here, and you just get some Crisco and rub it all over. Or if you want to, get a little cornstarch down on the countertop, roll it in the cornstarch, and just wrap it up. And I'm going to put this in an airtight container, and let's make another batch. So let's do the same process again. Greasing the bowl with the shortening. This bag of marshmallows is 10 ounces. And with 10-ounce bags, I always just add a little bit more. And I eyeball it. You can put it on a scale if you want to. But I generally just try to get about 12 ounces of marshmallows in here. About a tablespoon of light corn syrup. All right, that was a little more than a tablespoon. So we'll see how more corn syrup affects the outcome. Okay, so that was about 2 tablespoons of corn syrup. And let's do about a tablespoon of water. Pop it in the microwave for 1:45. Sifting half the bag of sugar. Same thing, mixing this with the spatula. I have some sifted flour here, so I'm just going to add a little bit on top. It's not flour, it's powdered sugar. Sifted powdered sugar from the last one. Add a little bit of that on top. See, I still didn't add the entire thing. And let's cover it with the wet towel. Lock it in place, turn it on low, and see what happens. All right, when I hear it start coming together, I'm going to turn it up a notch. All right, turning it back down to low. And again, I'm going to scrape down the sides. It's still a little wet up here, but in the bottom, it's dry again. So I don't need any more sugar right now. What I need is more water. I like to add the water while it's mixing, so I try to get it to the bottom when the hook is not in the way. Lock it in place, turn it on low. I have about a tablespoon. I'm not going to add the entire thing, just a little bit at a time, a little drop. Let it incorporate that water. Might turn it up just a little bit. They're still dry sugar at the bottom. So I want to add a little bit more water. I'm going to turn it up to like 4 or 5. Now, what happens if you add a little bit too much water? I'll show you. So let's add a little bit more water. All right, now I added a little too much water and it's not forming a ball around the hook. Right now, it's too wet, and no amount of Tylose powder that you add to this is going to stiffen it up enough. You need more sugar in here. So you could see as I'm mixing it, it's not wrapping itself around the hook. So it's too wet, it needs more water. I'm sorry, it needs more sugar. So let's add a little bit more. This is still the leftover sugar from the first bag. So I'm just gonna do a little bit. There's still more sugar in here. So I'm just doing a little bit at a time. Put the towel on top, lock it in place, turn it on low. I'm gonna turn it up a notch or two, just to incorporate it a little better. All right, moment of truth. I'm turning it back down to low. All right, it still is not wrapping itself around the hook, so I'm gonna add the rest of the sugar. And this was not even a full bag, again, was not a full bag because I did half of the other bag and then what was left in here. So, doing the same thing, locking it in place, turning it on low, seeing what I come up with. I could tell already that it's around the hook. Yes. So it's mixing around the hook. Could probably even use a little bit more sugar. So I'm just going to sift just a little bit more into this bowl. I'm just going to add a tiny, tiny bit more and see if I can get it to wrap around the hook in a little ball. Locking it on in place, turning it on low. Good. And look at that. That is so much better. I have Crisco in my hands, Crisco on the countertop, and peeling it off of the hook. And look, it's holding together in a ball. It's stretching, right? There's no dry spots in it. And this is beautiful. No lumps. It's smooth. There's the marshmallow fondant. And again, optional. I have a 1/4 teaspoon of Tylose powder. And I always eyeball the Tylose powder. I'm measuring for video purposes and knead that all together. Piece of food safe plastic wrap and rubbing some Crisco on the outside or rolling it in some cornstarch. And here's the container that I store my fondant in. Got this on Amazon. I can find it and link it below. I already have one in there. I actually made that last week and didn't use it. And I have the 2 others. And put it in here, sealed, in an airtight container. Keep it at room temperature. All right, there you go. I hope that helped you guys out. So the things that I really want to stress is that these measurements that I give you are really just a guide. You have to see what's going on with your fondant and figure out how to fix it. So for video purposes, I usually measure just so you can see what I'm doing, but for the most part, when I make marshmallow fondant, I think I said this in the video, I dump some marshmallows in the bowl. I use about a bag of sugar and, you know, the corn syrup and everything. Like, I just, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know, and figure out how to get it to the right consistency. So as you're adding the sugar in, add a little bit at a time. Make sure you're scraping down the sides. Make sure it's very, very important that the fondant wraps around the hook. and that way into a ball, and it kind of holds itself. It can fall off the hook, that's okay, but it should be holding itself together. If it's too dry, it's going to be crumbly and break apart. And if it's too wet, you need to add a little bit more sugar. Like if it's too stretchy, if it's not even holding onto the hook at all. So even if you add an entire 2-pound bag of sugar and it's still too stretchy, you have to add a little bit more. If it's not holding itself into the ball, how many times do I have to say that? But if it doesn't gather, then it's not the right consistency. So sometimes you might need less than a 2-pound bag, sometimes you might need more. It just all depends. Your humidity in the air could affect the outcome of your fondant. And just know that if your fondant is too soft and you think I'll just add some Tylose powder to it later, if it's really soft, you're gonna need tons of Tylose powder in it. It's better to just add a little bit more sugar to get it to that ball consistency. It makes me think of Rachel from Friends. Ball? There's no ball. Anyway, so I hope that helped you guys. If you have any other issues that you're having with making marshmallow fondant, leave it below. Hopefully I'll be able to help you out there too. So I think that's it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And you can follow me on social media, and I have my website, and it's listed in the description below as well. If you want to stick around, you can watch these 2 videos next. And hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Please like this video if you liked it. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, it's cake. Have fun. Woo! It's weird. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.